All right, everybody, welcome to the Women's Wellness Workshop. Now, my microphone is not working, so I'm going to stand close to here and project my voice as much as I can so everyone can hear me. Now, getting down to business today, we're obviously discussing women's wellness and women's health. We're going to be talking a little bit about your cycle and understanding the stages of your menstrual cycle, understanding how you can tailor training and nutrition for yourself or clients around their menstrual cycle and what you can sort of advise. We're going to talk about the positive and negative effects of stress, some hormone happy habits, and then I did write detoxing, but I don't think I wrote anything about it on here. So we can talk about detoxing after in question time. So the first thing that we're going to get into is understanding the menstrual cycle. Now, with the menstrual cycle, there's basically two halves, okay? So you've got your follicular half, which is days 1 to 14, typically of a 28-day cycle, and then you've got your luteal, which is days sort of 15 to 28 for your hypothetical 28-day cycle. When we break it down into 4 sort of symptom-based phases, that's where we have our period/bleed, follicular, where we're feeling amazing. We've got our luteal, which is obviously where we start to feel a little bit down the dumps, a little bit hungry. And then we've got our premenstrual, so the days leading up to right before where we bleed. Now, here's just another little look at the ovarian cycle, so your hormonal cycle. Now, with this, what we see, so we see the two halves, which we've got follicular in the first half, and then the second half, we've got luteal. And what we can see here is we can see how the hormones change throughout the cycle. And so if we go first and we have a look at our follicle stimulating hormone, okay, this stays pretty level for majority of our cycle. It's not as significant as sort of how our estrogen and progesterone moves around. It's basically, stays quite stable. And then when it comes time to ovulate and obviously prepare an egg, that's when it raises ever so gently. And then in hopes you give birth, in hopes you get your egg fertilized, then your follicular stimulating hormone may stay elevated for a little bit more. Typically what happens is during the luteal phase, once there has not been a successful sort of, what's the word? Not stimulating the follicle. Conception, yeah, sure. Immaculate conception from Mary. Once the egg has not been fertilized, that's what I was trying to say, and I kept thinking stimulated follicle. Anyways, so once the egg hasn't been fertilized, then follicular stimulating hormone starts to go back down, and then gently as you go through your bleed and the rest of your cycle, as you come into your next ovulation, it will gently raise again to prepare the next egg for fertilization. About to say stimulation. Can't keep looking at the word. Okay, if we have a look at estrogen, okay, so E2, there are 2 types of estrogen, okay. The one that we're looking at today is estradiol, yeah, and the other one is just called estrogen, I'm pretty sure, but it's basically E1 and E2. And so with that, what we're looking at with our estrogen is typically when we first bleed, estrogen is quite low. It's also very low towards the end of our luteal. Okay, and then as we start to come up into our follicular phase, I knew this would be confusing explaining it with all the terms. As we come up into our follicular phase and as we approach ovulation, estrogen starts to rise. As estrogen starts to rise, it's basically our superpower. We start to feel amazing. We start to feel strong, motivated, like we can take on the world, like we can dip into our masculine energy when we're not supposed to. But and then after that, similar sort of a thing, when ovulation completes the course and an egg hasn't been fertilized, estrogen will then dip back down. It'll have a little rise just after ovulation has ceased and you've gone more into your premenstrual phase, and then it dips back down. Okay, the next one is luteinizing hormone. And with that, pretty similar, as we come up into ovulation, it has a really, really, really strong peak. Okay, and then with that, it dips and same sort of a thing, stays low for the luteal phase and then comes around again on the other side. Okay, finally, we have progesterone. Okay, and progesterone is the one that a lot of people tend to have issues with. And when you see women who have high progesterone, that usually is what can lead to things like polycystic ovaries and that sort of a thing, hair growth, all that sort of a stuff where we're not meant to really get it. But with progesterone as well, it's quite low when estrogen is quite high. And this is where we feel our best. Yeah. And then it sort of swaps positions. Estrogen begins to dip. And then as we enter our luteal phase, typically the days that we feel weakest, yeah, in our cycle will be where the ratio or the difference between where your estrogen is sitting and where your progesterone is sitting is like this. So your progesterone is much higher than your estrogen. Yeah, and when you stay like that for too long, that's when hormonal complications start happening, and where you can lead to more hair growth, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, all that sort of thing. Basically, the illnesses that you get from unstable sex hormones for a long enough period of time. Okay. Now, basically what I want to explain is how we go, is what each phase is based off symptoms. So sort of what I just said anyways, and I'm just going to run through the notes here, and then we'll touch on training and nutrition and how to approach that within the phases. Again, if you have questions, write them down, write them in the chat for all my folks watching at home. Now, so yeah, just write them down and then we can answer them at the end. So phase 1 is obviously our period/bleed. Okay. And with that, it's going to last 3 to 5 days if you have really great hormones. Now, whose cycle here lasts longer than 5 days, or typically lasts longer than 5? Amazing. When you had a cycle, what was yours?
Yeah, probably.
Longer than 5? Yeah. Yeah. How many days is yours, Sophie? 6 or 7?
Yeah,
6 or 7?
7.
Cool. Okay. Mine would be 9 to 11 days every 28 days without fail.
Wow.
So it was really heavy the whole time as well.
I think it was 9 to 11 days.
Yeah, every 28 days. So it was like half the month I was bleeding. Hectic. But yeah, and so this is where, when it comes to having and knowing whether there might be a slight hormonal imbalance that can be addressed. Okay. And you should always, as well, I should note, by getting blood work, you get to really get into the nitty-gritty with it. The lifestyle changes that you can make will help a lot, but sometimes it's going to require extra sort of investigation, and that's where blood work's amazing for this sort of a thing. But yeah, so typically it's going to last 3 to 5 days with minimal, if any, symptoms. Okay. You might be a little sort of like fatigued at the start in the first day of the bleed or 2, but then after that it should sort of subside, and you should start to feel a little bit more yourself towards the end of the bleed or once you finish bleeding. Yeah. Now, if you've got more of a heavy period, then that can typically mean that the fatigue is much greater. It also can mean there's another hormonal imbalance that can be sort of rectified. And a heavy period also means that in terms of prioritizing things like your iron, things like your vitamin B, yeah, this is where, when it comes to eating red meat and eating proper, like good quality red meat, or having an iron supplement, which would be something like, coming from me, desiccated organ meat, so like beef liver powder, that sort of a thing. Because most iron supplements will just constipate you and you don't absorb all of that iron anyways. Yeah. Likewise, you're not going to absorb all the iron from beef liver, but in terms of not being constipated and not having to deal with then further gut problems down the line, this is where, if you're someone who experiences a slightly heavy bleed, or even if it's a one-off and you've dealt with a stressful period over the past sort of month, past few months, then this is where, noticing where your symptoms are at, you can eat more nutritiously sort of targeted foods to minimize the symptoms and the sort of fatigue and downfall from your period being a little bit funky. Yeah. Bang. Next one is follicular. Okay. And this is our IamTheBomb.com phase. Now, with that, it's basically considered it's the whole first half of your cycle anyways, but depending on how long you bleed, then usually the remainder up until when you ovulate is when you're going to be feeling your best. Okay. You're feeling motivated and strong. This is also where your body is going to be primed to perform its best, and because of that, be able to put on more muscle. Yeah, because of that, be able to lose more body fat. Yeah, when we're in a deficit, when we're building muscle, when we're in recomp, that sort of a thing. So this is where, if you were someone who were to tailor your it's really annoying. If you were someone to tailor your training around your cycle, then in your follicular phase, when you're feeling your best, that would be where you'd have your hardest week of training. Okay. When it comes to, and I don't think I really touched on it, but maybe I do, we'll find out soon. When it comes to nutrition, this is something that if you're someone who experiments with fasting, or you experiment with partial or full sort of liquid day fasts, which we obviously sort of talked about that last week, I utilize it every now and then. This is where, in terms of fasting and having decreased calories with that fasting period, you're going to see the best benefit. Yeah, you're going to see the least amount of muscle loss from your deficit, that sort of a thing. Yeah. When it comes to fasting, I'm not going to talk about too much. I'll try and keep it quick. But basically, when it comes to fasting, whether it be just a liquid fast where you're just giving your tummy a break from digesting solids, or you're going a full fast, you're just having water and weird stuff. Depending on, most females, we don't need to do a full fast. We can still get a lot of benefits from just doing a bit of a liquid break. But with that, this is where you're going to not increase, I want to word this right, you're not going to increase your cortisol as high compared to if you're trying to, say on the flip side, do the same sort of fasting in your luteal phase. Yeah. And the reason being is because in your luteal phase, you burn a little bit more, yeah, energy wise, but then you're also not recovering as well. Okay. So yeah, when you're going to fast, if you're going to fast, whether it be to give your gut a break or whether it be because you want to try some weird spiritual thing, then be my guest, but try and keep it around your cycle so that you can minimize the negative impacts from fasting. Yeah. Guys, they work on more of like a 24-hour cycle. So they can typically fast and just like have water, salt, and like coffee and be like, I'm a man, but it's not the same for us. So now the next one, we're a little bit more sensy, except bosses when it comes to giving birth, men couldn't do that. So the next one that we're talking about is our luteal phase, which is basically the second half, obviously, of the cycle. Okay. This is where once ovulation has finished, if you've ever seen those visuals of sort of like it's inside a bedroom and the little, your ovaries basically are really annoyed and they start ripping all the wallpaper down. That's basically what starts to happen. It's like, where's my baby? So with that, after our ovulation has sort of finished and we start to dip in and prepare to bleed, this is where as progesterone starts to rise and estrogen starts to dip, where we can start to see energy deficits and not feel our best in the day. Okay, we might not perform our best. We also may not recover our best. Also during our luteal phase post-ovulation, this is typically when you'll see a slight increase in basal body temperature, which can then disrupt your sleep because your sleep you need to drop, I think it's 0.2 degrees to actually fall asleep. Your body temperature needs to drop, which is why in summer it can be a bit hard to sleep, that sort of a thing. But yeah, so when sleep is impaired, you're feeling hot, you're feeling more hungry. This is usually where most people will reach for those pro-inflammatory foods, right? And be like, I just need some, like a bit of a dopamine hit, really, because you eat the chocolate and you're like, this is the best. But we add fuel to that fire of feeling shit. And so because of that, we get stuck in this 28-day cycle that's no longer just a menstrual cycle, but it's also this sort of almost binge and restrict cycle where you just go crazy in your luteal phase when it comes to food, when it comes to skipping training sessions, when it comes to being like, I just don't feel like weights training, that sort of thing. And then you go back into your follicular phase and you're like, yes, I'm dieting again. And people will do this for months and months and months, look the same, progressively feel worse, and then progressively obviously lose hope. And then the extremes get more extreme. Okay. So this is where in your luteal phase, we want to be prioritizing being kind and listening to your body, but also not listening to that little sort of, I guess, self-sabotage voice that can creep in, okay? Because this also, when our hormones and our estrogen starts to dip, especially after being just that little bit higher, it's very easy for us to, as our motivation dips, be more self-critical of ourselves, yeah? Be more sort of, I don't know, the 3 days before I used to bleed, Lockie knew my period was coming because I would be like, do you hate me or something? Did I do something to upset you? And he's like, I'm the exact same, but it's every month on the month. And I was like, oh, maybe it's me. But yeah, so your luteal phase, this is where sort of, I guess, everything can be flipped on its head and you can feel that flippening, yeah, the more unstable your hormones are. Now, ideally, with healthy hormones, with regulated hormones, you get to your luteal phase and you might notice that little bit of fatigue and notice an increase in hunger, but there's nothing too dramatic. Yeah, we start to see dramatic symptoms when there's something underlying that we're not sure of. We're not addressing something that's underlying. We may not be addressing the root cause. Yeah, does that make sense? Amazing. Should I miss anything here? Yeah, so our temperature increases. And yeah, so recoverability obviously is impaired. If you're not sleeping well, you're not able to perform your best, you're not going to be having your muscles recover the same. This may be where, and I'll touch on this later, but where training, you might want to slightly adjust, but not throw it all to the wind. So some people are like, just do Pilates in your luteal phase. And it's for girls who want to build their physiques. It just creates, again, this cycle where it's like, I'm not seeing much progress. Yeah. So yeah, and then obviously because recoverability is impaired, because you may not be sleeping the best or sleeping as well as you do in your follicular phase, that sort of a thing, detoxification can also be impaired. Yeah. And so in terms of holding on to more proverbial rubbish, yeah, holding on to more water retention, that sort of thing, we can be much more sensitive. Yeah.
You often tell what phase your clients are in when you're training them.
So can I often tell what phase my clients are in when I'm training them? Quite a bit, yeah. But then as well as that, a lot of people who come to see me, I say people like you're not all women in here, but a lot of people who come to see me tend to have some sort of an imbalance initially, but then it becomes quite apparent. And then it also becomes quite apparent if people are dealing with sort of more high stress lifestyles where like the PMS hits them hard, the luteal hits them hard. Yeah. Yeah, you tend to see a lot of women who around, again, the luteal phase, that sort of a thing. The same check-in form that says, like, I skipped my training session this week. I ate over 200 calories, 300 calories over my day for 3 days in a row. Says down at the bottom where it says, put your menstrual cycle in, it says due in 3 days. And it's like, right, that's why you ate more food. But yeah, and then you can sort of see where it's like, I don't know why I'm feeling so shit. Like I'm having a really low mental health week. Where are you at in your cycle? Day 26. Okay. But ideally, again, we should be able to minimize our symptoms with a lot of lifestyle practices. And this is another thing as well, where it's so important. What a lot of people do is they will go straight to the supplements. They will go straight to hormonal birth control to mask the symptoms, and then only have to later down the track when you get off hormonal birth control, or later down the track when you stop taking heaps and heaps of naproxen and everything, you've then still got to work out what the root cause is anyways. So if you can ensure that your lifestyle habits and your lifestyle itself is in alignment with your healthiest version of yourself, then you're going to be able to feel your best and not have such sort of significant symptoms. Yeah. Amazing. The last one's premenstrual. So obviously the few days before you bleed. Like I said, my symptoms for my period or my hormones are not the best, is crave weird things like peanut butter with sprinkles on top. And then I'll make like one bowl, like I was telling you about the casein custard the other day. I make one little bowl of something really ridiculously sweet, and I'll be like, that's it. Like, oh my God, I'm going to make one more. But then as well as that, I, for some reason, get really, really self-critical. And I'm like, Tina, the talking tummy, all that sort of a thing. And then my period comes and I'm like, I feel better. But yes, so in terms of premenstrual, these are sort of the last few days before you bleed. And this is where, again, when your hormones may not be sitting the best, you may start to experience more cramps, more inflammation, pelvic pain, lower back pain, fatigue, irritability, hunger. What else? Bloating, yep. So more food sensitivity, definitely. And yeah, this is where, when it comes to making adjustments for your cycle and living in alignment with a healthy lifestyle, again, because you're not a male that operates on a 24-hour sort of cycle, you're someone who operates on a monthly cycle. Yeah, and you could arguably, if we're 70% water, 80% water, then the moon does influence our moods. But with sort of trying to navigate your healthy lifestyle and your cycle, this is where you might need to, in your luteal phase, make particular nutritional adjustments to reduce inflammation on the body. Yeah. Make particular training adjustments to reduce inflammation on the body. Yeah. Your body may not be as good at sort of partitioning and detoxifying the stress that you put through it during this time frame. And it's our job to use nutrition, supplements, and lifestyle protocols to get you feeling your best throughout. Yeah. And not so, I guess, sensitive to your symptoms and not have your hormones go super, super wacky. Yeah. And we can do this again with everything that I just said. But this is where, again, I guess something that I just want to mention is it takes time. Yeah. So when it comes to our cycle and our premenstrual symptoms, yeah, that is a culmination of the previous 100 days of decisions. Yeah. So 100 days of stuff that we do. So eating pro-inflammatory foods, undersleeping, overworking, overtraining, that sort of a thing, that last 100 days. And that's just what we do. You've then got the psychological stress of dealing with sort of your emotions, family, career, that sort of a thing. And then on top of that, you've got like physiological stress that's very much your decisions that led you there. You've then got psychological, which is sort of how you deal with everything around you. And then you've got one more thing, but now I've forgotten what it was. That's right. You've got, I guess, what I am going to call more like logical stress, maybe. So in terms of everything around you that you might deal with, you've then got the stress of, if you're someone who has a mortgage that you're paying off, you're thinking long term, not just the psychological sort of what this person said really upset me, or my boss didn't like got this, whatever. But yeah, so you're dealing with so many sort of different stresses that we need to try and regulate. And you're dealing with that. If that's over the course of 100 days, not every day is going to be perfect. And this is why it's important that you learn how to best regulate yourself, and you learn how to best regulate yourself without the means of being on medication for the rest of your life if you don't have to be. Yeah, without having to, or I guess without going to a GP and the GP says when you're in your 30s that you need a hysterectomy. Yeah, because most often than not, there are usually other things that we can sort of go through and processes you can go through that might minimize the chance of you needing a surgery that removes what actually helps to control your hormones. Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. Turn back time, Tina Turner. Yeah. But that's I guess, like in terms of being here now, although we can't obviously undo the past, that sort of a thing, there's definitely things that you can still do to make sure that what happens now in your life, you can feel the best that you can be. Some of that might mean being on like hormone replacement therapy, and might mean being on hormone replacement therapy for the rest of your life, but that's okay. We live with that and we make sure that we can do whatever we can to get you feeling your best, instead of having to go back and constantly get your doses changed and just be a guinea pig for the medication, instead of just on a minimal dose that's more of a dose where you can get it checked and they're like, it looks pretty good, and then you get sent off. You come back, they're like, it looks pretty good. Whereas if you come back and every time they're like, oh, why don't we do this? You starts to get fatiguing. So basically, just because symptoms are common when it comes to your cycle, it doesn't mean that they're normal. And it doesn't mean that it's something that there's something that went around in the fitness community. I'm not sure if it's sort of in the people who don't follow a billion other personal trainers. But basically it was sort of this like, hot girls have IBS. Okay, did anyone see that? Yes. So Sophie's a PT as well. Yeah. But yeah, it was this huge, like, there was a couple different little news articles where it's like, hot girls have IBS, that sort of a thing. And it's like, what are we doing encouraging this? But it's so many people will laugh and be like, I need to always carry my hot water bottle with me. And like, I'm so angry, I get so moody around my cycle, and wear it like a badge of honor. Like, this is my excuse for being a bitch. And it's in reality, if you nourish yourself in a way where you can reduce those symptoms, you not only become a better person for yourself, so you get more out of your relationship with yourself, but you also improve everything else around you. So just because symptoms are common doesn't mean they're normal. And our goal is always to be able to work to a regular cycle within a few days, where you bleed for a little bit and your symptoms are very minimal, if any at all. So Now, common symptoms that show sort of signs of a hormonal imbalance are things like painful cramps. And so with that, cramps around the uterus region, the lower back and the pelvis. Okay, so I like to use me as an example because I've had a few periods. Not recently, but that's okay. My pelvis physically would feel like, when I had quite unstable hormones, it physically would feel like it was opening. So, when you're pregnant, your pelvis starts to gently open to prepare to give birth. And that's what I felt like every month. I was like, my pelvis is opening. But with that, in terms of painful cramps, it's not so much that it's just at the uterus. You might get painful cramps around the lower back, again, the whole pelvic region, that sort of a thing. And then you also might find, just in terms of electrolyte balance, you can get crampy everywhere else as well. So that's just a matter of being hydrated properly. Okay. Another thing is overpowering cravings. And so this is where there's one thing to, when you're in your luteal phase, you're burning an additional sort of 100 to 300 calories a day. Okay. So with that, it's normal to be a little bit more hungry in this phase. However, there's being a little bit more hungry and be like, ooh, that fruit looks nice. And then there's like, I need a Biscoff donut now, or I'm going to get really angry and bite someone's head off. So this is where sort of basically the extreme symptoms, the more extreme the symptom, the more that it's like, okay, there's something we can address here. And then the last one is obviously excessive bleeding. And that's either bleeding for a longer period of days and sort of, I'd say once you get over a week, like 7 days is also quite a lot of bleeding. Especially if quite a few days of those are heavy. But yeah, once you sort of get over 7, even over sort of 5 again, if it's heavy, then excessive bleeding is obviously a sign that there's a little bit of an imbalance. And if you are passing clots bigger than a 5-cent coin, yeah, that's sort of where the literature's at. But yeah, I feel like when you're heavy bleeding, it's changing your tampon more frequently than every 2 hours as well. But it's especially, and I wonder if it's like a girl thing that you just know as like the sisterhood. But it's, I feel like you sort of know when your bleeding is normal, when you're bleeding a lot, and when you're just spotting. Yeah, like you know when it's excessive, like holy shit, I've lost my body weight in blood, right? Not literally, but yeah. So with that, I'm hemorrhaging. But yeah, it's another sign that something needs to be addressed. Yeah. So when we're not addressing those said lifestyle factors, okay, we're technically robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? Now, does anyone know that expression?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Cool. So we're basically like, Peter's here, we're robbing Peter, and then we're just giving that money straight to Paul, and we're just doing this cycle. We're not actually addressing the issue, we're just feeding into the cycle. So again, you end up, hypothetically, you take like pain medication, so you take your Nurofen, your Panadol, all that sort of a thing. And then if your body is unable to fully sort of detox and process the amount of medication that you take, it's going to cause sort of more inflammation, potentially sort of little ruptures in your gut lining, which then lead to leaky gut, malabsorption of food. It can just cause a whole host of issues the longer that it goes on for, when we don't actually address the lifestyle factors. Yeah, and we don't actually address the root cause. So again, it's very easy to, same sort of a thing, get on hormonal birth control because it's convenient, because we don't want acne, because one of them, I got on at one time because one of the girls who was on a particular one, she got really big boobs when she went on it, and I'm like, I'm going on it. But yeah, it's, again, just sort of masking the fact that there's something that can be addressed so your body can function the way that it needs to. Okay, let alone the fact when it comes to being on hormonal birth control versus not, you are only sort of fertile for like a max 3 to 4 day window of the month, and sperm only lives inside the body for up to 7 days. Yeah. So when it comes to adjusting your sex life around the course of the month, that's again where it's something where you can choose to live in alignment with health, or you can be like, fuck it, it's too difficult, get me on the next pill, that sort of a thing. Yeah. So now we're going to touch on some nutrition and training with phases of the cycle. I'm going to have a drink of water. Wow, it's so good that you talk a lot. Okay, cool. And what we're starting with is basically during your period, you bleed. So starting with the start of the cycle. Now, when it comes to training, our main priority, okay, is minimizing systemic fatigue. So while your hormones are still low and it's the first few days of your bleed, you might not be feeling the best. This is where we want to ensure that you're spending an additional sort of 5 minutes warming up the body. And basically just if you're feeling a little bit more stiff, and then minimizing systemic fatigue. Now, what is systemic fatigue? It's fatigue on the system, the body. And when it comes to minimizing systemic fatigue, this is where, say you have 4 sets of a barbell deadlift program. Yeah, this is where you might take it down to 2 or 3 really good sets instead of just busting out 4 and flogging a dead horse, for lack of a better expression, and just causing your body too much stress that it's unable to bring itself back down out of that state and recover properly. Yeah, we got to remember when we are training, yeah, even when we're in a deficit, especially when we're in a deficit, but when we are training, we're damaging our muscles. We're not training and like, my muscle's growing. It's when we recover that muscle actually grows, when we recover, when we get stronger. So what a lot of women do, obviously, is you sort of thrash yourself throughout the entire month and you're like, why do I not look like the Les Mills instructor? And it's like, because the Les Mills instructor eats a shit ton usually, or vice versa, eats nothing at all. But with that, again, minimizing total volume of the session by being intentional with the sets that you do choose to keep and prioritizing that they're actually worthwhile. Yeah, there's no use sort of, again, doing 4 half-assed ones, when if you do 2 to 3 really good ones, your muscles are going to be able to bounce back and recover from that better. Yes, you'll see more progress sooner, but then you also will feel better for it. Whereas a lot of the times, especially when you may be under recovering, you notice you feel tired and lethargic after training and it just doesn't let go. Yeah, it's like constant. Yeah. So basically, I like to look at it as if it's not there, it's not there. So if someone comes in and they're bleeding, and for myself bleeding, I've hit some of my best PBs. but I also have listened and been in tune where if it's not there, it's not there. Because again, some days your symptoms might be really bad. You may have had a stressful 100 days leading up to the culmination of those premenstrual symptoms. So you might be more crampy. You might be more inflamed on the one-offs, even when you're doing everything right, because we can't control everything that happens in that 100-day period, right? So with that, if it's there, great. But if it's not, don't stress. Yeah. And if you're confused, you can ask me and I'll help sort of guide the right decision. When it comes to nutrition, we're thinking similar boat. We want to reduce systemic fatigue. So we want to prioritize, and this is pretty much throughout our entire lifespan anyways, prioritize more nutrient dense foods where we can and the appropriate energy sources for the appropriate tasks. So the little muffin that I gave you guys earlier was a pretty balanced sort of macronutrient split. And with that, that's good for now for you to sit here. It's good if you want to stand up as well. Where's my videographer? Soon. But when it comes to, say, training and you're going to want to minimize fatigue, you might want a bit more energy in training. So you might have your rice cakes with honey. Yeah. Right before training. The crumpets with honey. Yeah. Okay. You also maybe post-training, depending on what you're doing. Basically what happens when we train, and we eat before we train as well, your insulin and your blood sugar will start to come up. And then when you train, you exercise, it will come down. And when it comes down post-session, this can be the best opportunity for you to, what's the word? Your muscles are more insulin sensitive, basically. So it can be the best opportunity to have some additional carbohydrates, have your most carby meal for the day if you don't have a lot of carbs to space out. And this can help to regulate your energy levels, which can, again, reduce systemic fatigue overall and get you feeling better throughout the day. Instead of, oh, did someone else join?
No, sorry.
Oh, you're welcome. I've let you in. Yes, can't remember what I was saying. That's right. And no, that's okay. I just get weirdly overstimulated. Yeah, to regulate your energy. Yeah, basically. To regulate, again, blood sugar and how our body responds to the food that we're eating. Now, with that, carbs around training, a must. A serving of protein every 3 to 4 hours. And this just optimizes muscle protein synthesis. So the healing and regeneration of your muscle tissue, the strengthening of your muscle tissue, and either building or adding more muscle fibers to the muscle belly that you're trying to grow. Yeah. So this is eating protein every 3 to 4 hours. Yeah. And that, as best as you can, it's obviously not something that we can all do. Yeah, especially if you're someone who you're working for 4 or 5 hours, your MPS will be compromised, but it's not the end of the world. So it's just important to know, again, that I guess I'll touch on with the serving of protein every 3 to 4 hours, your body can only absorb about 25 to 35 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours. This is why when it comes to optimizing muscle protein synthesis, optimizing muscle growth, you see a lot of bodybuilders do tend to have like 5 meals a day, that sort of a thing. At the end of the day, it's going to be like the 1%er sort of a thing. But if you can, this is where you want to space out how much protein you're having relative to the day, or if you're consuming a large amount. So I know for me, sometimes I accidentally knock out like 80 or 100 grams of breakfast and I'm like, oh, whoops. But with that, my body may not absorb all of the protein that I've just consumed. So what it will then do is it will convert excess protein into glycogen through means of gluconeogenesis, which is just basically how the body breaks down protein through the liver, turns it into glucose so you can use it as energy. Yeah. So protein every 3 to 4 hours if you can, and then a serving of fat with each meal. This is going to help to regulate that post-meal blood glucose curve. So when we consume fats and protein with our carbs, or protein or just fat with our carbohydrates, we help to regulate that glucose curve and we don't get as significant of a spike. Yeah. Which then means we don't get as significant of a trough, as significant of a drop. Yeah. So yeah, and then when it comes to obviously picking your fats, eating something that's high in omega-3 or something that helps to reduce inflammation and then encourage cell regeneration. So if you're eating a deep fried chicken burger, yeah, it will taste amazing, but it's not going to help reduce inflammation. Okay. Now, during your follicular phase, so this way we've just finished bleeding and we're coming into feeling our best. This is where you want to push yourself, test your limits. Likewise, I said, if it's something where you want to try fasting, I know I like to fast every now and then just to do, it's more of like a David Goggins thing. Like it's more of a how strong can my mind be? Because food is where if I get stressed, I tend to turn to it until I realize, and then I'm like, oh, and then cry. Anyways, no. But yeah, so during your follicular phase, we're looking at obviously pushing ourselves, testing our limits. So you want to prioritize obviously training as well and pushing that extra rep, pushing a little bit more weight. If your technique is perfect, think to yourself, am I really nailing my RPE? Could I push a little bit more? I remember when it came to assessing my own training, I used to not film my own exercises that much unless I was filming it for Instagram. And because of that, and because I didn't film what felt hard, what felt like an RPE 10, could not do another rep, the day I did film it back and I was like, oh, better start filming a little bit more often. And this is before the online coaching days. But the day I filmed it back, the last repetition where I was like, oh, I can't do another one. It literally was an RPE 5. Like I had it just flew up. And I was like, wow, I really am just playing the victim here. And in terms of how we assess ourselves, this is where testing that RP, testing if we have got the extra weight, we have got the extra repetitions. This is where if you can film yourself, then you can get that live feedback right away, or obviously with me. But then you're also looking at obviously beating previous times if you're doing cardio. Yeah, that sort of a thing. You're looking at adding more weight, that sort of a thing, using all tools in your toolbox to push as hard as you can in this phase, because this is where you're going to be able to perform the best and recover the best. Granted, all our little pieces of the puzzle are as close to being in place. Yeah, as they can be. Now with nutrition, this is where, when it comes to being in a calorie deficit, if you were someone who wanted to tailor your nutrition to allow for more calories in your luteal phase, where you get a bit more hungry, this is where, and this also means that you sort of have to have a regular cycle, otherwise you just end up playing silly buggers. But this is where if you want to drop your calories a little bit lower for the week, you'd be able to do that. Yeah, your body's, again, optimizing its recovery sort of processes. And so with this, say 250 grams of fat mass is 2,425 calories of an additional deficit across the week. Wow, those mushrooms really work. So creating an additional deficit across the week, and if you divide that by 7, then that's roughly like 300 and something calories lower. Yeah, or again, if you did a day of fasting, that sort of a thing. This is where nutrition-wise, if you wanted to push your fat loss phase a little bit harder, you could be able to, yeah, without having sort of the same negative connotations as if you were to do this across other parts of the phase. All right. When it comes to nutrition uptake, I guess the other big thing is it doesn't matter what phase, you still want to be eating really nutritious foods. You still want to be eating foods that are high in antioxidants, foods that reduce inflammation. Yeah, so that doesn't change regardless. But when it comes to potentially optimizing particular sorts of foods, this is also where your body may be able to better tolerate carbohydrates. And so this way you may want to bring your carbohydrate intake up so that you can then perform better in the gym, see those results, and build your muscle. That's the tipping point. All right, sorry, I get real thirsty. All right. And I feel like I've got the little bits on my, you only get those when you're talking. All right, so next one is the luteal phase. And this is where our priority is doing the best we can with the tools that we have. So again, you can't control, and even if you did, it would be a pretty miserable life if you could control the 100 days before your current cycle. Yeah, before your current cycle symptoms. Yeah, so because of that, you want to do the best with what you can. If you're feeling great, so like I said, during my period and during my luteal phase as well, I've hit some of my best training PBs. So it's not so much that you can't push, but you have to listen to your body. If it's not there, then be like, okay, what can I do instead? Yeah, and if it is there, be like, all right, let's try it and assess each set. Yeah, so when it comes to training with your luteal phase, if you start to feel a little worse for wear, then you can again drop a set down and focus keeping the intensity high. Okay, you could even do another rest day and have 2 rest days in between a workout instead of 1. Yeah, you could also, I'm not going to get into splitting training days up, that sort of a thing, but you could also, this could be the week that you book in the massage. This could be the week where you're like, you know what, I'm going to go to the sauna 3 times this week and go for an ocean swim, hypothetical. Yeah, all that little stuff that helps to reduce stress physiologically on the body, we want to utilize that to our advantage. Yeah, this then means that if we can lower and empty out our stress bucket, then we can be intentional and choose what to stress with, choose how we use our stress. Yeah, has anyone read the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
Years ago.
Basically, it's like you only have so many fucks to give. So you think of your stress bucket as when that fills up, you've only got so much to give. So if you can regulate and you can work out what's actually important and what you can do to maximize the stress that you do have, the stress that you can use. It's the same sort of a thing where it's like you're going to stress anyways. You may as well use it to your advantage by not sweating the small stuff and by prioritizing the stuff that matters. Yeah. Does that make sense? That was a bit of a tangent. Yeah, cool. Amazing. Okie dokie. Now with nutrition. So what I wrote here in the notes is, dear diary, why am I so hungry? Why do I feel so depleted? And basically your body is starting to burn an additional 100 to 300 calories per day. Yeah. So as your basal body temperature comes up, okay, just post ovulation, we start to get hotter. And because we're hotter, we start to obviously burn more calories with our body. Our body's processes to then keep our temperature from continuing to rise. Yeah. So with this is where you might, because
body's working harder to keep us cool, which is why we're doing more calories.
Yeah. So your body temp goes up, but then to stop it from continuing to go up, because I'm pretty sure, I feel like you would have a good idea about this, but you can only, it's between like 37 and 39, your body temp. And if you go outside of that range, that's where you go into hypothermia or hypothermia. Opposite way. So with your body temperature sort of going up, which is like half a degree Celsius, so it's 1 degree Fahrenheit. Yeah, is basically what it will tend to increase by. Yeah, max 2. Yeah, from what the literature says.
39.5, right? We normally say like 38.5. 38.5. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what's the lower end?
Like below 35. Yeah, sometimes we can take it below 35.8.
Yeah. Yeah. So in our luteal phase, we heat up, obviously, and so we don't continue to heat up. Our body works a little bit harder. We sweat a little bit more, all that sort of a thing. And because we're burning that little bit of extra energy, we get a little bit more hungry. Yeah. So this is where it's pretty normal that you're like, I'm feeling a bit more tired. Okay. Because you're not eating the same amount that you theoretically, or you don't have as much energy available from the same nutrition that you were eating the week before. Yeah. Long story short. So with that, this is where, if you're in a recomp phase, if you're in a building phase and you're like, I was feeling extra hungry this week, so I ate more. I'm like, cool, that's great, whatever. But when you're in a fat loss phase, this is also an opportunity where you could use the luteal phase and the fact that you burn a bit more to be smart with your food choices. And then see, by the time you get to your period, see a bigger drop than if you had deviated from the plan, increased your food because you're feeling hungry, and then you end up sort of breaking even at the end of the week instead of continuing and getting a greater rate of fat loss for that particular week. Yeah. So with that, is there anything that I missed in here? Yeah. As always, you want to keep your nutrients as high as you can. And then as well as that, if you want to, and again, if you're in a build or a recomp phase and you want to prioritize additional nutrients, you want to prioritize typically additional carbohydrates. Okay. The brain, and I touched on this in the last workshop, but the brain burns each day about 130 grams of glycogen, carbohydrates, just to function. So that's just sitting at a desk. Yeah. Let alone the fact that you then move, you train, you got a step goal to hit, you're moving like this, like being animated, that sort of a thing. And a lot of the times when you're dieting, depending on the state of your metabolism, your carbohydrates for the entire day might be 130. They might be 110. I know mine got down to 90 in comp prep and I was just a zombie. But that's also, again, in the fat loss phase, the trade-off that you make to lose the body fat. Then you recomp, bring your calories up, that sort of a thing. Yeah. So luteal phase, you can use it to your advantage in a fat loss phase. It's also not the end of the world if you do eat more calories, like you're just fueling your body because she's in a state of lack. Yeah. But then as well as that, if you're in a build phase, then that's also where you can increase your calories and continue to perform at a higher rate potentially. Make sense? Cool. Lovely. All right. And then last but not least is premenstrual. And so training and nutrition, this is what I wrote. So I just got to read it because I think it's funny. No one else has to think it's funny though. It's what matters is what's in here. So it's, dear diary, why is the world so mean? Why is that puppy so cute? Why is resistance training the last thing I feel like doing? Why am I crying? So when it comes to, when it comes to your premenstrual cycle, it's not even, your premenstrual period. It's not even so much that the mood swings are always negative. Sometimes it's seeing, so for me, it's seeing my goddaughter, who she's 3. And when she says, I love you, Zoe, and I'm not feeling like hormonally I'm about to get my period, I get so emotional. I'm like, that's so beautiful. But then likewise, like I said, all Lockie has to do is breathe. And I'm like, what have I done? Like, why do you hate me? But so in terms of sort of your emotions being slightly heightened because your hormones are slightly adjusted, that sort of thing, it's not always bad to cry. Yeah, in fact, it's usually pretty good to cry because you get it out. Anyways, with that, during this phase of our cycle, so when it comes to training and nutrition, this is again where you want to listen to your body. If it's not there, it's not there. But then also where you want to prioritize, if you can take an additional rest day, yeah, and that makes you psychologically feel better. So I know this will typically be when I have my weird in bed days watching Netflix on my laptop. Now I haven't done that in like 9 months, but in terms of your little, I guess, things that make your inner child happy, that sort of a thing, this is where if you utilize those and you reduce stress psychologically, that helps to, again, because our body perceives all stress as sort of the same thing, that then helps to reduce stress overall. We then don't get severe symptoms. Whereas when we just ignore, that's obviously just increases our symptoms over time and then increases further issues down the track that can have nothing to do with our cycle, but can mean that we sort of are constantly playing cat and mouse with medication, cat and mouse with supplements, because we're not actually in tune and able to listen to our intuition. Yeah. So with that, you may feel, obviously with the adjustment in your hormones, you may feel that obviously your motivation dips, that sort of a thing. To know that it's normal is the good thing. Yeah. Because you then don't have to let it be you then don't have to let it impact the way that you make decisions in your day-to-day life. Yeah. So if you're someone who leads up to your period, sort of like I said before, and you're like, I'm always a bitch leading up to my period, I'm always hungry, I can never stick to my diet. Like that is all external forces that you're using as an excuse instead of addressing the fact that I know this time I need a little bit more care for myself. I know in this time I need you to hold my hand. Okay. But all that sort of a thing where instead of using it as an excuse, we can use it as an opportunity to look inwards and strengthen the relationship with ourselves, which then strengthens our relationship with the world. Yeah, reduces stress, and then Bob's your uncle, right? So you also, during this time period, you might want to prioritize either A, reducing your training volume, B, increasing healthy fats and dropping carbs and sodium. And this because carbohydrates can have a slightly more inflammatory response on the body. Yeah, I know for myself personally, my tummy gets quite sensitive to carbohydrate sources during this time of the month. But if I increase my fats, I could have 300 grams of steak for breakfast, no bloat at all. Yeah, but if I have rice or if I have potato, it's death me. Whereas every other time of the month, I've got to eat rice because I've got to hit that carb goal. But yeah, so all of these little things where as the body's a little bit more sensitive, you can choose to ignore it. And then what happens is you have to obviously pay for the price of ignoring it, or you can make these little adjustments, which is obviously little things we can do. You can also do a combination of the two. So you might reduce training volume and slightly adjust your macronutrients. Yeah, and then feel your absolute best. Some people might feel fine continuing to keep carbs high. We're obviously using carbs when we're doing things. Yeah. And then some people might feel much better keeping their fats really high and dropping their carbs down. So it's a little bit of trial and error with yourself, a little bit of trial and error with clients, but very quickly you tend to work out what feels best. And then by the time 3 months of hormone happy habits have occurred, 100 days have occurred, you get to a client with a cycle that comes on time and there's little to no symptoms at all. Yeah, or that it comes on time and it lasts 3 days instead of 7, and you're like, oh. So yeah. Now, basically, we want to, when it comes to stress, as you can tell, women's wellness, a lot of it is based around stress. Okay. So we've just touched on a lot of things for the cycle. Now we're going to talk about stress and how we can utilize stress to our advantage. Now, with stress, there are 3 pillars that I want to discuss. And one of them is training, okay, which is like a physical stress regulator. And what I mean by that, and hopefully I can work out how to touch on all this without it sounding wonky, but in terms of being a stress regulator, if you train 3 beautiful sessions a week, you feel amazing. You will ultimately increase inflammation, increase stress, increase cortisol in that training session, but be able to regulate it and bring it back down. Okay. If you, and regulate stress that way. If you decide to not train for the week because you're like, I want to reduce my overall stress, but psychologically you feel like you don't know what to do with yourself and you feel, yes, guilty, perfect, or not perfect, but yeah, guilt, shame. I know for me, the like self-criticism just skyrockets if I'm like, oh, maybe I need an extra day off training. But yeah, coming in and doing something little, all that sort of a thing. Yes, it is a physical stress regulator. So it is how we will manage our stress physically, but ultimately the training is what will increase stress, and it's our body's ability and our ability to pull ourselves out of that state after. That's going to indicate how much we can use this to our advantage instead of letting it rule over us. Yeah. So you typically find, and this especially happens with women who have lost their periods, is that you need to go through a period of time where you either don't train at all and you've got to put on a significant amount of body fat. And then in that time mentally, if you're feeling absolutely psychologically shit, like you, because it's obviously can be the opposite of what you're used to with training and not having so much body fat on you, that sort of a thing, then that psychological stress is just adding to the inflammation and adding to delaying the next period. So it's such a sort of a fine balance and a juggling act where when it comes to training being more of a physiological stress regulator, we need to be mindful that there's too much and there's too little. Yeah. And depending on where we're at with our lives and with our hormones, that sort of a thing, that will depend how we use it to our advantage. Yeah. Next one is nutrition, which is a metabolic stress regulator. So obviously when we're eating really beautiful food, when we're eating lots of nourishing food and we're eating at our maintenance or slightly above, we're going to feel our best. Yeah. However, sometimes psychologically, if you're not comfortable with eating at your maintenance or slightly above, then you feel worse off eating all of this nutrient dense food and being slightly over what your maintenance calories are, because that psychological stress you might be putting on body weight kicks in. Yeah. And so then you feel better when you reduce your food intake because you're like, oh, I feel lighter. Right. So with our nutrition, obviously what we eat helps to regulate and decrease our stress levels, that sort of a thing, nourish our bodies, reduce inflammation, but then as well, how much we eat. So of course, if you eat in excess as well, so if you eat, say your maintenance is 2,500 calories and you're consistently hitting 4,000, or even if you're trying to do a dirty bulk and you're eating, for anyone who doesn't know that term, it's like we're putting on muscle with junk food, which doesn't work that well. So that might be where you eat an additional, say, 500 calories a day. Yeah, which is, especially for females, typically excess. Yeah, eating in excess. So what you need in order to regulate your stress with your nutrition, you would typically, and over time, if you can make sure that psychologically you're looking after yourself and feeling your best when you're in your maintenance period or eating around your maintenance calories, that's going to lead to better progress, reduced cortisol, more fat loss in the long run, and greater muscle growth and muscle recovery as well. Yeah. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Great, cool. I'm like tangenting now. And then last but not least is our recovery. Okay. And so recovery is an all-rounder stress regulator. But likewise, we can use that and use a little bit too much, be a little bit of a soft Sally, or we can under recover, obviously, and be like, I'm doing ice baths every day. And then obviously be a little bit macho and not see the benefits from the recovery protocols we're doing. So there's a sweet spot in the middle. Yeah. With that, I guess just want to touch on that with the training being a physiological stressor where you train and your muscles are breaking down, it's very easy to forget that something like an ice bath, which ultimately people do to reduce stress, an ice bath is causing a huge spike in cortisol. It's causing huge sort of inflammation markers, that sort of a thing, to appear in the time. And what makes the ice bath so amazing is your ability, once you can bring yourself out of that fight or flight state. Okay, what makes the ice bath so amazing for muscle recovery, so amazing for fat loss, so amazing for mental clarity, mental strength, is your ability to bring yourself out of the fight or flight state that you go into when your body hits that cold exposure. So when it comes to recovery, if you're doing ice baths because you're like, I hate my life, and then you're in the ice bath and you're like, it's not going to be healthy. Yeah. So you need to be strategic. This is where I used to have cold showers every morning, or just finish on cold every morning, because it was the David Goggins thing to do. Yeah. And then I realized, I'm like, this isn't helping me. But then sometimes, so this morning I only had a shower on cold, but because I was in a good headspace, because I stayed in there until I regulated my breath, it's beneficial. So making sure that you utilize these stress reduction protocols to your advantage is also really important. Yeah. So basically, to summarize it, we want to think of stress and how we utilize our stress appropriately on a dial. So with that, if our physical stress, our training is quite high, yeah, so say I'm an athlete prepping for a competition, that sort of a thing, our training volume might be quite high, unless doing a powerlifting thing, then it's like you can train once a week. But if you're, for most athletes, training sort of maybe 4, 5, 6 days a week prepping for a particular event, yeah, if you're a bodybuilding athlete, you're probably doing 7 days. With that, you're going to find that because the physical stress is so high, something else is going to need to give. And this is why when it comes to things like bodybuilding and the physical stress is obviously so high and the metabolic stress is so high, this is why people tend to become quite reclusive, because there's no give for emotional bandwidth with individuals that they're with, friends, family, that sort of a thing. Likewise with career, if they've got a really stressful job, then they typically won't see the best results when it comes to their physique, when it comes to retaining muscle, that sort of a thing. Yeah. So when we're using our stress, we want to try not to have everything firing on all cylinders, because that's again where we start to increase excess inflammation in the body, increase our stress hormone, which then when cortisol is high, it also acts as a storage hormone and promotes us to store more body fat. Yeah, so slows our metabolism down, for a better word. I did quotation marks for those watching at home. But yeah, so basically we want to manage our dials and make sure that not everything is going up balls to wall, and we're being strategic with where we use our balls to wall approach. Yeah. Now, when it comes to physical stress, so training, say you've got a high stress job, your relationships right now, you're the one that's doing all the sorting. So it's high stress, that sort of mum life. Yeah. I was like, I know you'll get it. With that, I say that like I'm a mum. I just have 2 cats. So when it comes to career and relationships, but then you're also in a diet and you're also going to train hard, this is where, again, being able to use your stress dials to your advantage. You can then, with physical training, train 3 days a week. But if you're training 6 days a week and you're trying to manage everything else, you're going to go overkill. Likewise, you might be really good at dieting on 1,500 calories. But then if I'm like, you know what, let's push it. We're losing 1.5 kilos this week, so I'm going to put your calories down to 1,200. That's going to send you off the rails. So it's really important we utilize our dials appropriately, because with our emotional stress, relationships, with our career stress, which is psychological stress, the impending doom of like losing your job and then not being able to afford your home, which a lot of people are, especially in this sort of time. A lot of people do tend to get really stressed that they might not have a home in 6 months' time if they lose their job, that sort of a thing. This is where, if we can balance other things appropriately, we're not going to see as many negative adaptations. And we're also going to be then, as a byproduct of that, able to manage our emotional stress, relationships better, manage our psychological stress, which can be career better, be able to make smarter decisions at work instead of jumping the gun and making irrational decisions. And making irrational decisions, obviously emotional, career, but then also making irrational decisions with training, like, fuck it, I'm skipping training. Or the opposite end, where it's like, I'm going to CrossFit. Or same sort of a thing, irrational decisions metabolically. Today, I'm starving myself because tomorrow I'm going to binge. Like, all that sort of the irrational decisions and the extremes. As a female, for our hormones to function optimally, we need to be very intentional with what we choose to be extreme about. Yeah. Cool. So, wow, that was really cool. I don't know if anyone saw that animation, but that was pretty cool. I didn't even realize that was turned on. But basically, we want to see stress and use stress as a bit of like a pendulum. So, likewise, which I sort of touched on before, when there's too little stress, okay, this is where we will see little to no progress. Okay, so too little stress is another term would be, that you may have heard, is under aroused. Yeah, so when it comes to too little stress, this is going to the gym and dusting the weights off. This is what a lot of people do. And you can also, when it comes to lifestyle and then it comes to health, you can have no set goals. Like, I'm just training to feel good. And it's like, where's the metric in that? Because you skip training and you binge drink on the weekends. Like, if it's to feel good, like, are you feeling good, or are you just, what are you doing? Anyways, and then there's basically, when it comes to having really little stress, this is typically when we look at the all or nothing mindset. This is the nothing side of things. This is the I don't give a fuck about my nutrition. I don't give a fuck about my training. And then it leads to the all approach where it's like, you know what? I'm signing up to this 12-month challenge. I'm starving myself. I'm training 7 days a week. I'm doing ice baths in between. So yeah, so that's the too little side, right? Now, on the other side, we've got, someone's going to get in trouble in a minute. Where is he? Should be here. He knows we're up here. Anyways, so the other side, we've got chronic stress, okay? And that's obviously overstressing, and that's overstressing for a long period of time, which turns it into chronic. So again, when we're strategic about our stress, we sit more in the middle, which I'll get to that. But when we're not strategic, we're consistently training to that RPE 10. So this again, very like under eating and doing CrossFit 7 days a week. So if you're eating good food for CrossFit, you will be an amazing athlete. But most of the time, general population, they're like, I want to diet. And then they're doing 100 reps of deadlifts into 100 reps of like muscle ups and wondering why their body's not changing. Yeah. It's also sort of like I just said, under eating, undersleeping, overworking. When you're not feeling your best anyways, whether it be psychologically, whether it be physiologically, you tend to have impaired sleep anyways, which then with impaired sleep, it inhibits your body's ability to utilize body fat in terms of energy to rebuild muscle, okay? And then that feeds into a cycle. If you're under recovering one night, so one night of poor sleep, like that's all you need to sort of be under recovered, you need to address that. And this is why I harp on, like, you guys know, as soon as you join, if the check-in form is like consistently bad nights of sleep, I'm like, this needs to be fixed, right? Because one night of bad sleep, the next day is impaired, not only physiologically, it's not only on the inside, but again, your decision-making is impaired. And so when it comes to body composition results, when it comes to building muscle, losing body fat, that sort of a thing, it's much easier to crave more foods and give in to that craving. So your motivation and your willpower is inhibited. Yeah. And so this is where then it's easier for you to mess up. It's easier for you and more tempting for you to then be like, you know what? I've already messed up my diet today. I'm not feeling the best because I didn't sleep well last night. So I may as well not go to the gym either, right? It's like you accidentally get a nail in one tire, so you slash the other three. Yeah. So that's typically chronic stress. And then also obviously what can happen with that is you can end up feeling more anxious, more depressed, okay, more brain fog, all that sort of a thing. And then you end up with chronic stress. You see a lot of people, especially a lot of women, where you end up setting unrealistic goals only to be disappointed every time a hurdle comes up. Like we think when we're in this all or nothing state, so that's more the all approach where you're balls to wall. We think when we're in this all or nothing state, we're being smart, we're being motivated. And so we set these goals of I'm losing 10 kilos in 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and I'm going to the gym 5 times a week, sticking to my diet to a T, and I've got a birthday this weekend, I'm not fucking going. Like, and then quickly after sort of 1, 2, 3 weeks max, maybe a hurdle comes up with something like you could get fired from your job. And all of a sudden you don't give a damn about that goal. It's like obviously that's very stressful getting fired. But with that, when it comes to setting unrealistic goals, when we're in a high stress state, we tend to be in more of a desperate state. And so that's where that comes from. Yeah. Now, the just right little area where we get our best results. This is where we're consistently training within an RPE 7 to 8. Oh, sorry, 7 to 9. So we're pushing the envelope when it's appropriate. We're also tuning in and checking in with our bodies when it might be more appropriate to have a lower amount of intensity. Watch me be really confused now for the rest of it. Hello. That's all right. Is this Jaden? Jaden's competing in 7 weeks now. He's our videographer for the day. I saved some flowers for you if you want as well. A little bit of baby's breath. See, now I'm panicked about my little bits. Hold on. I'll get that on Instagram. Yeah, it's really annoying. Lockie always brings it up like he's like, you've got the bit on your face again. All right. 100%. Okie dokie. So let's get into the just right area. Now I'm going to just also, so you guys got, I know you've got your screen there, but just so you can see the green area is quite large. Yeah. Whereas the too far on one end, too far on the other, they're quite small portions of thing. The scale is the word. And so with that, the good thing about Just Right is, again, realizing that we're not working and operating on a male sort of 24-hour cycle, but we're more operating on 28 roughly day cycle. This is where pushing the envelope on some days and being towards that upper end of stress may be appropriate, but then likewise, listening to our body, being in tune and staying on the lower end of that scale might be more appropriate other times. So this is why the Just Right sort of portion is quite large. Yeah, because it's not as simple as just to stay here, be fixed. Yeah. Now with that, so like I said, we're consistently training at about a 70 to 90%. So RP 7 to 9. Okay. We're eating nutritious foods to fuel recovery. Okay. Very important, obviously, if you're in a calorie deficit, but then likewise, when you're in your building phases, when you're in your recomp, we're also wanting to make sure that the food that we are eating is doing its purpose. Yeah. This is how we're going to make sure that we're not creating excess sort of inflammation that we then have to try and burn through. But instead, we can minimize and choose, similar to sort of the subtle art of not giving a fuck. We can minimize and choose where we want to give our stress to. Yeah, instead of it just being overkill everything all the time. Yeah. And then we're obviously prioritizing stress reduction protocols. And so this may be using the ice bath when appropriate, but not using it just for the sake of this is meant to be good for me. Using it when it's like, okay, I'm prepped, I'm ready, I'm going to get in, I'm going to freak out, and then I'm going to be able to bring myself out of that fight or flight state. Okay. As well as that, obviously being able to partition and focus stress to one's benefit, basically, to summarize. And then last but not least, pursuing challenging and fulfilling goals. So this is just something that I wanted to touch on, because obviously when we're at that lower end, it's that little to no progress, we tend to not really have goals. We're like, I'm coming to the gym to dust weights off, like at least I'm going. Which again can be good, but typically is not going to be stimulating enough for you to actually be in that regulated stress state. Yeah. Likewise, with chronic stress, the other end of it, this is where our goals are unrealistic and we're like 10 kilos, 12 weeks, balls to wall in the gym, balls to wall with our diet. It lasts 1 or 2 weeks and then it's done. We fuck up or a hurdle comes up where we can no longer sort of keep our motivation high. Yeah. Because that's our, and so with Bianca, with your holiday, that was like once the holiday went, it was like, oh shit, where'd my motivation go? Right. And so with that, it's so normal to sort of feel a bit lost when we're not clear on our goals, which then is what can also obviously add to that increased stress instead of decreased stress. So the last point of obviously the Just Right is pursuing challenging and fulfilling goals. So it's something that is going to challenge you. It is going to require you to dedicate some of your stress, but likewise, it's not going to be either going absolute overkill and being unrealistic, or the other end of the spectrum where you're just setting something like, say, for most of us, 2,000 step goal per day. Yeah, if you're setting that just because you know you can tick it off, join the club. Literally everyone else in the day is going to do that same thing unless they're like on bed rest, right? Cool. Okie dokie. Now we're going to get into some hormone happy habits. And so with this, there's a bit of a generalized approach. Like I said, when it comes to women, when it comes to us, we are all individual with how we will manage our stress best and how we will want to utilize our stress and partition accordingly. Okay. And so this is where I'm going to give you a few sort of pointers of how I best manage my stress and how I'd encourage you to. But then I'm also going to give you a few little general pointers, which hopefully today will leave you with a little bit more clarity when it comes to looking at your life objectively. Yeah. So the first one is we want to be intentional with our time. Okay. We want to notice I've said the word intentional quite a lot anyways. And so it's important when it comes to being intentional with our time, we want to simplify our approach. We want to clear out the fuzzy stuff so that what we're doing, who we're spending time with, okay, what we're working on matters and matters to us, okay? It doesn't really matter if it's sort of, if it's what your boss wants. If it's really just draining you and it's not fulfilling you, it's going to have a negative sort of impact down the line if you can't find that little bit of meaning to it. So with that, be intentional with who you spend your time with, okay? You want to connect with like-minded individuals, obviously like we're here today. And all loved ones, depending if they're the same people, sometimes your family gets on your nerves. And then as well as that, obviously doing activities that promote healthy habits, promote love, promote connection. Yeah. This is why when I gave you guys the flowers today and I gave you the little muffins, yeah, it's like it puts you in a good space. Yeah, it's giving, if your love language is gift giving, it puts you in a happy space. Yeah, and the more that, because we started on that good note, yeah, it means that the rest of the session we're connecting, our walls are down, our stress is down. Yeah. And so because of that, that's going to have you hopefully leaving here feeling better than when you got here. Yeah. Maybe hungry by the time we get to the end of it, but that's why we got muffins. So with that as well, that could be things like when it comes to promoting healthy habits, going for a walk with someone. Yeah. Some people who, so say my mum right now, and I walk with her, if we walk a particular walk and it hurts her hip, she's got the shits. So being strategic with and intentional with who you spend your time with and what you do with that said person is going to matter as well. Yeah, so being intentional with who you spend your time with. Next is pursuing your goals. And so being intentional with that. Again, setting goals that are unrealistic or setting goals that are ridiculously easy just to give your ego a pat on the back are not going to get you anywhere. You want to be intentional with pursuing your goals, because if you can align that goal and align the challenges that come with it with more of a purpose, it creates fulfillment with that goal and it creates fulfillment with the journey. Okay. Whereas what you're going to see happen when you are not intentional with how you pursue your goals, you're not intentional with what goals you've got, that sort of a thing, you're going to typically find yourself, again, hypothetically, most of us tend to set unrealistic fat loss phases for a holiday that's in 4 weeks when we haven't stuck to a consistent exercise or training regime for the last 6 months, like that sort of a thing. It's a bigger picture thing. And it's something that the more that you can get clarity on that, the more you can be intentional with what you're willing to tolerate from yourself, what you're willing to tolerate from others, and then be able to pursue that goal accordingly, which is then going to, again, leave you feeling more fulfilled, more in your purpose, more living in alignment with that purpose or the highest version of yourself, which then ultimately reduces stress on the body, helps to regulate your hormones, brings us back to square one, right? And then the last one is spending time by yourself. So being intentional with spending time by yourself, okay? And so this is not mind numbing, binge watching Netflix, scrolling on TikTok, okay? This is actually spending time by yourself, being able to journal, being able to meditate. Your eyes are like, journal. But being able to actually sort of be present and be kind to yourself in that silence when no one else is around. A lot of people do find it really difficult, especially in a society where we are overstimulated with instant gratification as well as social media, all that sort of a thing. The time that we spend by ourselves often creates angst where we've got to put music on and blare music in our ears. Like you can't go for a walk and just listen to the birds. Like it's too much going on here. Likewise, you get home and to unwind, you need TV. You need that distraction because what's in here is too much to handle. So being able to be intentional with how you spend time by yourself is ultimately what helps to heal that relationship. Now, this is again, similar to sort of the 100 days culmination thing. You can't control everything that happens externally. And some of those external things will require, a period of time where you might want to be distracted so you can better help process something, okay? You know this with stressful work situations, stressful relationship situations, all that sort of a thing. Yeah, traumatic situations. It's not as black and white as never watch TV again, but it's being intentional with that alone time, because if you notice yourself that every time you are alone with your thoughts, that you're tending to have flare-ups, issues, that sort of a thing, then that's usually leading to something being stuffed down, which if that continues to stay stuffed down, that stress is always going to reside there. Has anyone heard of The Body Keeps Score, that book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically all the trauma we experience holds in our body for our entire life, unless we address it. Yeah. And so this again, being intentional with your time with yourself, being intentional with your conscious time with others, and being intentional with how you spend your time pursuing your goals, all helps to then reduce stress, align you with your purpose, and get you living in that well state. Yeah. Then in terms of being intentional, we also want to obviously be intentional with our diet. Okay. And so with that, your diet is not only what you eat, it's what you watch, what you listen to hang around with. Yeah. You have to remember that you need to be intentional with the things that you put in your body, and that's physically, spiritually, emotionally. Yeah. So just addressing one facet of your lifestyle, you can see that we're bringing everything together. And the more that you can move with intention, the more that you can move with purpose, the more that you're going to be able to ultimately reduce stress, be more well, yeah, and practice that women's wellness. And then from there, obviously have that carry-on effect of progressing faster with your training, nailing your nutrition when it comes to fat loss, when it comes to builds, not being I guess, as self-critical of yourself. And then when it comes to PMS symptoms, not having PMS symptoms. Yeah. Now, my personal hormone happy habits, because I couldn't just leave you with some really vague like recommendations of being intentional. These are what I do pretty much every day. Yeah. But then as well, again, we've got that 100 days. It's not going to always be perfect, but these are the things I prioritize daily to ensure that my hormones can be as happy as they can be. Yeah. And so the first one is keeping my circadian rhythm regular. Okay. We've got shift work in here, but with this, sleeping and waking within the same sort of 2-hour window. Okay. So if that's, for me, that's 7 to 9 p.m. and that's waking up between 4 and 6 a.m. Yeah. Ideally, your circadian rhythm, even if thrown off only minorly, even if thrown off by only sort of say an additional hour, it can end up to that impaired recovery state the next day, which can make it much harder for you to function at your best and your hormones to stay regulated at your best for that day or for the consecutive days that follow. Yeah. Likewise, you obviously can't control and have a perfect sleep, bang on, same bedtime, same wake up time every single night, but we want to be intentional with how we set our circadian rhythm. And then for our shift worker, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing the sleep that we are getting is as nourishing as possible. Yeah. So Bianca takes particular sort of little sleep supplements, earplugs now, eye mask as well when you sleep in the day, all that sort of a thing, because it's not like you are going to leave your job tomorrow, and it's not like you're choosing to stay in your job and complain about it. You're choosing to stay and then optimize what you can so you can perform at your best. And that's another thing where it's, again, like heaven forbid you don't get the 7 to 9 p.m. bedtime. It's still doing the best that you can that will ultimately reduce stress overall and see you still having happy, healthy hormones, despite being a shift worker and not having that consistent bedtime that you must have. Yeah. So really important. Again, it is still specific. Now, I prioritize drinking 2 to 3 liters of water every day, okay, with electrolytes and with a little bit of Celtic sea salt or Celtic sea salt as well. And with that, what you drink in the day. So as a bare minimum in training, if you were to weigh yourself before and weigh yourself after training, you're going to find you weigh sometimes a kilo less. If you're doing more of an endurance sport, it could even be 3 kilos less. Okay. We tend to, depending on the particular time of the month, how much sodium we've consumed and how much carbohydrates we've consumed in the previous 24 hours, we will hold on to a particular amount of water. Okay. So when it comes to staying hydrated, we also need to make sure that the 2 to 3 liters, we're actually balancing our electrolytes. Yeah. When it comes to our main electrolytes, coconut water is obviously a good one. It's got 5 of our main electrolytes. Okay. And coconut water is quite high in potassium. Yeah. When it comes to regulating our electrolyte balance, a really simple way to look at it is your sodium to potassium ratio. You want to have it at a particular point where you don't feel dizzy spells when you stand up. Yeah. And basically what that is that's regulating your blood pressure to a degree. So with that, if you have too much potassium, not enough sodium, you can find you get muscle cramps because of the electrolyte imbalance. Likewise, if you have heaps and heaps of salt and you don't have a lot of potassium, then you can get muscle cramps. So a lot of people say eat bananas for cramps because they're high in potassium. Yeah. So when it comes to the 2 or 3 liters of water, it's not just 2 or 3 liters of water. It's being intentional with what that 2 or 3 liters of water is. Yeah. Now, the next one is moving my body in nature for at least 30 minutes each day. So when we're in nature, and forest bathing is the term, which sounds or is as beautiful as it sounds. Yeah. Being around in nature, being around in greenery and real greenery, not fake stuff. With that, the plants release negative ions. Okay. And so they bounce off our positive ions, and then that ultimately reduces inflammation in the body. Okay. Forest bathing and moving your body outside is very similar to, or it is the same basically, as grounding. So this can mean going for a walk on the sand at the beach. This can mean getting in the ocean, in the water. Yeah. Or it can mean going for a walk at the national park. Yeah. But moving outside for 30 minutes per day, you're obviously going to get that little bit of an ion balance, but then you're also going to be hopefully getting your vitamin D. Yeah. Now, for you to get your recommended daily intake of vitamin D, I believe it's 15 minutes in the sun. And it's 15 minutes between 11 to 1 p.m. So when the sun's at its peak, for 15 minutes only. Yeah. So if you're in the morning, you might want to go for like a 45-minute walk. If you're in the evening, likewise. Yeah. And that can help to regulate your vitamin D levels. So you then don't need to supplement out. Yeah. most humans are deficient in vitamin D just because we spend so much time inside as well. Yeah. What else? So minimum protein and fat targets. And so in terms of hitting minimum protein fat targets every day, obviously I want to optimize muscle protein synthesis because I'm a bodybuilder. No, so that obviously my tissues can recover properly, because ultimately if they're under recovering, then I'm creating more of a high stress state. That's going to impact not only how my physique looks and performs, which is obviously sort of my main goals, but then it's also going to impact how healthy I feel, how energized I feel, how strong I feel. Okay. And if my tissues are impaired, they're not going to be as much support for my bones and my bone density. And so it all ties in together. The more that we can obviously hit our protein targets, yeah, the more that we can minimize inflammation, heal and recover our muscles, tendons, and ligaments, connective tissue, and obviously feel the best, okay, and the strongest. As well as that, minimum fat targets. So with our fat targets, we do typically want between 0.6 to 1 gram per kilo of body weight. And that's going to help to keep our sex hormones relatively stable. Again, as you can see, many things influence how our sex hormones respond. Yeah. But by keeping our fats at in this particular range or above, if you feel best with them higher, because again, sometimes reducing carbohydrates, increasing fats can help to reduce inflammation just that little bit more. Then with that, I'm going around in circles, but with that fat range and hitting that, you're going to find that you'll be able to reduce inflammation, especially if you're eating fats that are higher in omega-3s, okay? Fats that are higher in, I think it's omega-5s as well, but vice versa, if you're eating fats and you're in that range, but they're deep fried, that sort of a thing, you'll probably be increasing inflammation. But hitting your minimum protein and fat targets is going to ensure cell regeneration, cell recovery, and it's also going to encourage regulated and stable sex hormones. Okay. You can tell I'm getting tired because I'm on. Cool. Beautiful. Now, so also eating food groups that nourish your body and then minimizing those food groups that you have a response to. Okay. Minimizing or addressing the issue. So typically you'll find when it comes to gut sensitivities and eating particular foods that didn't used to set you off before, but they set you off now, that sort of a thing. Our gut microbiome, it bounces off and gets feedback and gives feedback based off what you eat most of the time. So you can slightly change your gut microbiome, but it's going to be linked to generations, to ancestral times of what the base sort of is. Yeah, so you typically find people in, I think it's North Africa, their diet is about 90% grains. And so with that, heaps and heaps of carbs, rice, wheat, that sort of a thing. Whereas if you put someone who's from the UK on that diet, they're going to quickly get insulin-related issues, quickly become maybe overweight, but then also have all problems sort of spike up, simply because their gut microbiome isn't built to tolerate that same amount of food. Yeah, you might see a lot of, I want to say like Filipinos as well, heaps of rice, hey. Yeah, rice. No, you're Vietnamese. I thought, I thought so. I could have sworn someone was Filipino. Never mind. But yeah, Filipinos eat heaps of rice. Yeah. And so also just Asian countries a lot of the time too. But because of that, again, you put that same diet with someone from the UK, someone who is completely Caucasian, and they can have a completely different response in their tummy. Yeah. But yeah, I'm so sorry. I totally got opposites mixed up. Yeah, cool. And then the next one is taking specific supplements. So if you have been given specific supplements, then making sure that you are taking them at the right time, you're taking them with or without food as sort of recommended. And then you're also taking sort of the right bioavailability ones to the best of your knowledge. So you can buy sort of supplements from, say, the chemist that say that they're the highest strength vitamin C, but there's, I think, 8 different types of vitamin C. So you want the vitamin C that's ascorbic acid. Yeah. And so there's all these little things where if you can get recommended and take the appropriate ones and the best ones for you and make that investment, that's going to have a really good carryover as well. Then prioritizing connecting with loved ones and downtime / recovery time from business or from work. Yeah. And then as well as that, stress reduction protocols, not just ice baths, but journaling, meditation, stretching, sleeping, and then also therapy. So yeah, so you're not always going to be able to just journal your way out of any shit. Sometimes you do need to speak with someone, and with that as well, that helps to then reduce inflammation, leads to happier hormones, lets everything else perform to its best ability. Cool. That's because we're going to the Philippines. Oh my God.
That's
So-
what I was thinking.
Yeah. So Sophie's got a retreat, a women's retreat in November. Yeah. I was so confused. I was like, why have I got Philippines stuck in my head?
That I knew that.
It's because we're going to the Philippines. Cool. Okie dokie. So this is towards the end now. It's your turn to write out and work out what your best sort of structure for a day is going to look like when it comes to optimizing your wellness, optimizing your hormones, and everything in between. So the first activity with your notepads, I would love for you to write out, and so you know this is a 24-hour action exercise, 24-hour action list. Basically write out in time allocated format to the best of your ability what a current typical day looks like. So hypothetically, you wake up, you check your emails, and then you have a big coffee, and then you have a shower, and then you finally have water when you first get to work. I hope no one writes that. But yes, so just write out your typical day in time written form. You can go in 15-minute increments or that sort of a thing and write a little range. And then we're going to basically unpack and see where we can slip in or adjust and get a hormone happy habit in there. Cool. I mean, try one of these muffins now. That's how I was like, I hope no more than 8 people show up today because then I won't get one. Jaden, can you fit 160 calories in?
Although that's really good day.
Oh. Oh, they're really little lumps. Hey, they didn't really puff up how I thought they would. Like,
That was fantastic.
taste is the main thing, but it's what's on the inside.
Perfect.
Like else.
What we're riding, that's the problem.
We're close enough, not gonna see that.
Oh my God, I'm scribbling.
Sophie, are you staying for lunch? 2 p.m? No. Bianca, Georgina?
No, probably not.
No?
Sorry.
Cool, that's okay. I'll just tell Dave no one's coming in.
Oh, sorry.
No, it saves me money. It's all good. Complimentary lunch, all good.
Over.
Seriously though, next time you guys have to come.
Yeah.
Mm,
Where
yeah.
is that place?
It's just around the corner. It's just easy because I know the owner. I can text him and say it's 5 people, now it's 8, now it's 2. Like,
Yeah.
and it's fine. Whereas sort of, and now it's, I've cancelled the booking.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, don't be silly. But yeah, so he's just way more flexy. Whereas obviously if I book an actual like place, I've got to be like, you're coming. I don't care what you say. Are you training?
I don't think
No.
so. I feel like
You
my
guys are
back is
out.
still- I know.
Yeah, how's your back?
It's better,
Hmm.
but I just have to fuck it up, and then I'm working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so I'm like, when I wanna go to work. Yeah, I was just going on the treadmill, I brought my.
Yeah, you can stay. Oh,
She's gonna stay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna
I
go
brought my
treadmill,
treadmill.
but.
You get one-on-one
Oh
time.
my god, I'm scared now.
And on machines, because we've got machines
Oh,
here. Whereas
okay.
obviously you've got garage, I've got garage.
Yeah.
Bang. All right.
Now, is everyone on this one?
Right, that's all good. So can I ask, looking upon your own list, yeah, and this usually I'll also ask you guys to send me a photo, but sometimes with your lists, if I'm like, we need an intervention. But with your list, can you see something that sticks out that's probably not serving you? So if we have a look at your list, can you see something that, it might be a bit of a barrier to adjust initially. This is something you really like, and I know that's pretty much fiction. Okay? Yes?
Yeah, well, like when this is like permanent on my day, like.
Yeah.
One, like if I have to work late
Mhm.
and then start early.
Yeah.
That doesn't serve me.
Mhm.
And then also. When that same thing is happening when I'm working late, like lunch, dinner is like really close.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, so if we haven't addressed this in check-ins, I'd be like, I've got so much to tell you. But yeah, basically with what we've implemented to mitigate the negative stress response from that, would you like to tell our audience?
Put me on the
What
spot.
we've changed? Well, yeah, so it's,
Oh, whatever will change.
well, could we adjust your food?
Yeah.
So having smaller dinner.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you.
You tell, it's like when you have to go to the doctor.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah. So yeah, so what we did, our lunch dinner was really close together, okay, and we don't eat for a really long period of time to go. So what we ended up doing was like making lunch a bit bigger, because you have a few more hours of moving around to digest things. Okay, we made dinner a bit smaller, yeah, and then we still continue moving around anyways, but it means that those two meals so close together. I'm going to have
Being like that, sorry, I have to give my key to my
I'm going to have such a negative gastric impact, yeah. But then when you finish your day as well, so you're not hungry going to bed, and so you go to bed a relatively crack in the night, which is more apparent at the start when we did the pre-bed breaks, which you know, we've done pre-bed breaks for you as well. With that, you still have your fruit at night when you get home. So it's not like you just eat it at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. and then not get until 9 p.m. So that yeah. Whereas before, the highest stress situation was having 2 good meals almost back to back in the afternoon and then being hungry. Yeah. So
you don't have dinner.
was
Yeah, now like 4. And, but then I have lunch at like. 2:30.
Yeah.
Oh my.
have you got anything else on that day that's a bit hey girl? What about your wake up? Your wake up routine is pretty good. You're not rushing. What's
Yeah.
when you're rushing?
When I definitely.
Bang, bang. See, that's perfect.
That's my thing.
How many happy habits? Okay. All right. Next in line, Miss Georgina.
Yours is easier.
That's
fine. That's right. It's so good.
It's
not
the biggest thing that fucks me up is work. I'm there for like 13 hours by the time I get there. I can't wake up, eat, go to work, come back, eat, go to sleep.
Yeah.
I'm so boring.
Well, it's a typical day. It's what we do. So with that, can you, I guess with your mornings when you wake up, what do you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you leave the door? What's your,
Have like my lemon water, and apple cider vinegar, and then I have breakfast, coffee, get ready, and then go straight away.
how much time do you leave between your water and your breakfast?
We get up similar times.
Yeah.
We can manage it quite well.
Whatever I can do in the morning.
Do you eat before you go to work?
Yeah, I normally like eat, like either eat right before I go or eat in the car.
That's a very distracting meal time.
Yeah, I know, because I live like at 6 to get home, and I don't wanna wake up before 5 to go to school, I'm like, that's really not.
So what you could do that would be a hormone happy habit is with your breakfast in the morning, and the only issue would be getting hungry sooner in the day, which would just, depending on your work schedule, you can't really control when your lunch break exactly is. But it would just be not snacking with the little chocs and stuff that are at the desk.
Yeah.
But what I would suggest is if you're going to be eating in the car, because you're more distracted, you typically aren't taking as many bites before you swallow. And because you're swallowing the food more whole, you're then creating more of a process that your tongue has to try and go through to digest the food. And this is typically where, I love this getting on film, but typically where you might find stuff left over in your stool, or you might have inconsistent stools because you've got solid parts of the stool. Yeah, I know, right? So it's cool. Okay, that was the visual. What I would suggest to minimize stress and again strategically be able to manage stress is to have a smoothie in the morning. Make sure it's nutrient dense, and even I find not a hot smoothie, but like my bulletproof recipe. I'll put a bit of honey in that if it needs carbs, because I find if I have something hot, I won't be hungry for a while. But if I have a cold smoothie. If I have a cold smoothie, I'm like hungry straight away. Yeah, but that would be something, instead of trying to say, well, chew your food down to a paste while you're driving and you're trying to focus on the road and some random comes out, like, again, you can't control what the sound like is. Why not, in the power of your control, have something that doesn't really require chewing? Yeah, then that way the gastric stress is reduced. You end up not being as potentially bloated as if you eat something that's a bit funky. But we obviously do meal plans here, so everyone with meals are in meal plans. So it's fine. But yeah, with that sort of thing, that would then help to minimize stress anytime and create a chain. What's the word? Like a butterfly effect. But yeah, chain reaction, and not an effect of lower inflammation, lower stress, gastrically in that present moment, which could then mean even just one more decision that you're able to make more rational because you're not in such as much of a heightened state as you would be as if your tummy was impaired. And then say you get thrown into work and straight away you're dealing with a traumatic situation at like 7 a.m. You know what I mean? Yeah. Compared to like if you show up and it's like everyone's really cute and happy. Yeah. Because as well as that, and you would be with just stress tolerance better at managing it than probably anyone else in the room. Yeah. I don't know you well enough. But yeah, in terms of managing a trauma response, your body's ability to come out of fight or flight might be slightly faster, but it still may go into it. Okay, especially depending on if you're dealing with visuals, audio, that's going to be really triggering regardless. Yeah. So yeah, so smoothie might help to make it less triggering. No, yeah, might be a smarter idea, almost rush.
Yeah, sometimes I like have enough time to park and I sit, so I like that's what Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Georgina, I'd love to hear yours now.
It's just a busy day. I'm the director of a childcare centre, I'm a mum, everything. So, yeah, I usually get up at about 5:20 as well, so this is where we juggle. But I think I'm going to be starting to get up at 5 because I do a very long day. So, work-wise. So, yeah, so I basically now get up at, 5:20, 5:15. I go straight in the shower. If she's on the shower, I go in the shower. Get dressed, and then I go to the kitchen. I usually have all my food prepped. It's oats day. Yeah, it's oats day. It's all prepped and ready to go in the bag. If it's not, egg day, I will be making my eggs and then get ready to go. I feed the dog. I usually do a load of washing, hang it out, and then I'm out of the house by about 10 to 7 o'clock. Go to work because I start about 7:30, 7. Get everything sorted for the day. Children start to arrive at 7:30. I usually have my oats ready. I usually go to the office because I've got the morning schedule, and I usually, this is my problem, eat while I work. So basically at work, my work is like Like it's never the same, no day's the same, there's 50 million interruptions. I could be a lot on the floor teaching, working with special needs, children getting bashed by special needs children, or completely in the office. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like every day is completely different. So I can't, sometimes I'm on my feet a lot, but sometimes I'm sitting down a lot. But it's very rare that I take time to sit down and eat by myself, calm, relax. We usually, because I do meetings with the girls at lunchtime, because that's the only time we have.
Yeah.
So that's when the children are resting.
Yeah.
So we have lunchtime meetings. That's usually like, at least 2 days a week. There's 2 rooms. And then, the other days I'm trying to catch up, meeting at my desk, lunch. And then I'm usually, but I do have regular time frames where I eat, which is good.
Yeah.
And my body tells me when I'm hungry. So that's usually exactly the right time,
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good like that. And then I usually leave work around 5:30, 6, home by 6. Then I'm food prepping. So, or getting dinner sorted or finished. So I need to start, I've done a little bit, sorted. And then usually by about 7, I do training. So it's either whether I'm going to Zumba class on Monday, Wednesday, or I train in my home gym. And then after that, I eat dinner. So it's usually about 8 o'clock, 8:15, latest 8:30. And then because I tried to eat before and I started to feel sick, because I thought I was eating too late, but then I tried to eat before my training and I just couldn't because I just feel sick. And then usually I wash up, clean up, and then usually sit down on the couch by 9 o'clock. That's fine. To chill out, and then I go to bed at 10:30. Between 10 and 10:30. Cool. Yeah, that's my day. That's my weekday.
Yeah. That's busy, hey?
It's very busy. Yeah.
Now, with that though, you are present for all that, or you can be a driver? You just be running like work 10 hours.
What do you mean? Is that what I mean?
Present, like you are there, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, not distracted, yeah.
I'm quite far. She asked me, the girls always like, how are you so energetic? Because I think my job is so like, multi-dimensional. Yeah, like I'm always solving problems and thinking and helping and I'm doing that. Oh yeah, okay, you need help, okay, So there's a phone call that deal that. So I do. And then suddenly by the end of the day, I'm like, crash out, like I feel my body's physically aches and I feel brain dead and exhausted. So for me, what I find very hard to schedule is that yes, I feel my body's constant pain, and probably also because of my hormonal problems, whatever. But I just feel I find it very hard to have that downtime. So when I do have that downtime, it's like I'm flat out, like I can't work over, okay, So now I've got to schedule in my walk. So I'm getting it out at 5 o'clock to get the walk in. I think that might actually be good for me because I'm going to have some alone time with nobody and except me and my dog. And I think that's actually going to be hard to get up at 5 o'clock. But my husband gets up at 4:45, so I hear the alarm anyway. Sometimes I really enjoy that extra half an hour sleep, or not even sleep, just lie in bed. I gather my thoughts. I just, that's my relaxing time.
Yeah.
Between 4:45 and like 5:15, 5:20 before I get out of bed.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out of bed when he gets out of bed. I'm like, I can't. But then I'm ready by 5:15, 5:20, so I think it might be here too. So this is the adjustment I'm gonna make. It's gonna really try hard to get out of 5 to go for that walk.
So the big thing when you are in the same bed as your partner and their alarm goes off first and you get to stay in bed, it's one of the best feelings in the world. So good. Yeah, like it's the most rejuvenating.
Oh, it's my favorite time of the day.
It's like, so that makes total sense. One thing, if you listen to any podcast, Jenny, you've got a good thing that the one thing that we can definitely control in our day, regardless, which can help to minimize stress, is our first thought and our last thought of the day.
Yeah.
So we typically have what is like 15,000 thoughts a day, surely it's more.
Oh, it must be.
It's
so.
way more.
Yeah.
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 And before you know it, as soon as there's even one external factor, like husband's alarm goes off, and you're thinking about how you know you really said that thing to pass. Like,
Yeah, sure.
already something and someone else externally, something has interjected into your brain. And if you, a lot of people will then roll with that, when you wake up first and you need to check emails. And then the rest of the day, it's like you're a slave to the system because you start your day. So one thing that sort of you can control and that helps to mitigate and reduce stress is starting and ending your day, choosing that first and that final thought.
Yep.
So one thing that Joe David does is he wakes up and the first thing he does is he thinks about what he's grateful for. At least that's what he says on his podcast.
He was a monk, I would say he would.
I would say, yeah, you're right, that's right. It is an actual one. So
Okay.
don't mind some words.
Right.
But one thing after trying to prioritize that myself, I quickly realized time to go think about what time it calls up, what time I'm gonna get up if I want to get my walk in.
This is what I do, yeah.
And you start to go, and that hyperactive, fight or flight state essentially, because there's no other option. You haven't got time to play around and be like, oh, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm gonna listen to my body, like, I haven't got time for that. So again, right? But this is where again, your first thought can dictate the rest of the day, right? And so it may not be waking up at 5 and being like, oh, let me roll over to my journal and write down everything I'm grateful for. But it might be as simple as I'm going to choose this first thought today and be like, how comfortable is my bed? Yeah. For me, it's usually how comfortable is bed. Yeah. But then it also can be little things like if you've got a really beautiful view out of the window. Yeah. If the house is clean, the fact that you are in a safe house and you made it through another night, no break-ins.
Yeah.
All that sort of like there is so many crazy things you can be grateful for, and the more that you start spiraling into that gratitude, the more of a positive frame of mind you start your day on. And instantly you're in a less of a fight or flight state, less of a sympathetic state, more of a parasympathetic state, and there's our rest and digest state. Your digestion functions better. Yeah, and that's your rest and recovery state. So all of a sudden you're functioning on a beautiful wavelength where the rest of your day can have a bit more flow instead of potentially being jarring, like one jar task after another, where you're just getting hit by the time you get to the end of the day. If you think of yourself as it's a hydraulic press. You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
I've seen those videos, are really satisfying. Where it's like all day you're getting hit by this hydraulic press, and you get to the end of the day and it finally turns off and you're like, a deflated balloons, yeah. But if instead you can start your day and be like, I don't need that to, like, the way that the impact from it doesn't have to give me the same response. Doesn't have to be so jarring. Yeah, I can absorb that and then push away instead of the things you know, lower and lower till we get to the end of the day. As in, that's the growth of the time.
Yeah.
Lower and lower till the end of the day until you get to that point and you just fall over. Yeah. But yeah, so it could be something as simple as that. If there's no additional time. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing because again, saying why don't we do 15 minutes of stretching before bed? It's going to optimize your recovery, it's going to reduce stress, it will. Yeah, and the time you spend in front of the TV is another healthy habit where you can still be in front of the TV, but choose to be intentional and be on the floor. Okay, choose to wear your blue light glasses so that your body's production melatonin isn't shunted by the blue light that's coming through the TV. So there's little things like that where you can make that choice to optimize areas of your day that don't necessarily mean removing the things that you know give you that dopamine hit and make it feel good. Yeah. Okay. So just make sure as well, yeah, you're writing down everything that because in terms of your habits, basically what I want you guys to do is be able to set an alarm on your phone this week for where that habit is and where that adjustment needs to be made. So you can remind yourself every day for the rest of the week to nail that. And to add that hormone happy habit in, instead of sort of just letting, again, those external factors dictate how your day runs, instead of being like, I'm choosing to do this because it has the knock-on effect, the butterfly effect, chain reaction. So is that Tina Turner as well?
Chain reaction? No, it's John Farley. Oh, there is no, it's a girl who says chain reaction. Sorry. Is that Diana Ross? No, Diana Ross. I don't know, what's come to my head. Or maybe this is the word in Yeah, don't. Oh, done it.
There's a shop.
I should go. Oh,
All right, so your turn.
oh, okay.
It's run through your typical day.
Well, I've been doing everything wrong lately.
Oh.
So
It's just come back.
oh my
Yeah,
god, I'm back. I mean, I've had to move home, but it's been a year for me, so I'm done with that. Anyway, so I would wake up at the moment probably between 6:37, naturally. And then pick up my phone, start scrolling, get my dog out of the crate, have a cuddle, and sit in bed for like 15 minutes or so.
And you scroll while sitting there. Have you done any water yet?
No. Continue. And then I would get up, go to the bathroom, take Lulu outside. So she'd go to the bathroom, then I come back in, I start getting ready. So I have a shower, get out. I would start doing my makeup, my hair, my phone, getting ready for the day. Then I'd probably be having some water at this time because I'd also take some of my medication and my supplements and stuff. And then I would typically make a coffee before I go to work. So I leave home at about sort of 8:15 and walk to the bus, and then I drink my coffee on the bus on my way to work, and I'm on my phone listening to a podcast, music, or just scrolling on TikTok. Get into the office about 9, and then I just slept from 9 until I leave. So I would more often than not lately not eat breakfast, have a coffee, and then at about 12:30 I'm like, oh my god, I'm starving. When do I have a free break? Walk out, go get some rice paper rolls, come back, have that. I tend to leave work at about between 4 and 5. So I can get home to take Lulu out because she's being home by herself. And then I would work on the bus on my way home, get home, take her out, and then slide back on to work. I'm fucking about really, and then I'll do what I need to do at home. I might have a snack when I get home too, because I've only had the rice paper rolls, so I'm getting pretty hungry. And I'll just reach for whatever's there. And then I probably have dinner about 7:30, and this is the time where I get on the sofa, but I can get my laptop and I continue working until about 9. And then I will log off at about 9, and then I probably have about half an hour on which is maybe to get into bed about 9:30, and then scroll. And that could be for an hour, depending on how tired I am, or until like midnight. And then also multiple times in the night.
Can you ask what you do for your drinks?
I won't pick them up for you, so
You use TikTok for work.
I do use
Right,
it for
right,
the
yeah. So,
well, I went so
Yeah.
so it's just because I manage a lot of brands.
Yeah.
Brand manager that will manage like Johnny Walker, but I do Johnny Walker and take great things.
Yeah.
You know, all of the
Yeah.
brands, so it's
to
very-
jump in a lot of
Yeah.
accounts, yeah.
but yeah, it's good though. I like that the work is flexible, so I